had just drifted off to sleep on my chest when my phone vibrated on the nightstand. I shifted gently, not wanting to disturb her rest. The screen glowed with a message from Mom. I braced myself for something dull and rehearsed. Maybe a reminder about the formula or a link to some Scandinavian parenting blog she thought I should check out. But instead, there were 6 words that shattered my entire reality. We're moving to Barcelona. I emptied the account. Good luck. I didn't move frozen for a full 60 seconds. My limbs went still before my brain could fully register. I launched the banking app and stared at the balance in our shared family. Fund 0, nothing left. The same account we had all chipped into Mom, Dad, and me. It was for emergencies to support Brian's recovery. They drained every cent. No follow-up. No contact number. Not even a sign dash off. My breath caught short and sharp. Ira stirred lightly, her tiny hand curling against my collarbone. She was warm and trusting, completely unaware that 2 people she'd never remember had just made a choice that would affect everything about her future. I kissed her forehead gently and whispered, "Thanks for the update." I couldn't even wait until the weekend passed. I was meant to take care of Era while Brian recovered from that supposed breakdown in Berlin. No one had said how long. No. One mentioned it would come with a vanishing act and financial betrayal. But then again, they never labeled things clearly. I carefully placed Era into the travel bassinet, her breathing soft, her cheeks still flushed with sleep. Then I walked to the kitchen where I kept printed records, something Mom used to mock me for. I retrieved the latest bank statement. Just 2 weeks ago, the account had over $18,000. I tried calling them straight to voicemail. I texted Brian, "Read." No reply. My chest didn't hurt from panic. It was something deeper. Recognition. Of course they did this. Of course I was the one left behind with the baby, the bills, and the silence. The fridge hummed quietly behind me as I leaned against the counter, scanning the space around me. Bottles, diapers, her tiny pink sleep sack still warm in the laundry. Bin, everything that had belonged to someone else. Now suddenly lined up by morning, I'd start sorting Era's routine. Look into legal guardianship. But for now, I just sat beside her and watched her sleep, everything in me aching with the knowledge that they weren't coming back. Not for her. Not for me. The thing is, I shouldn't have been shocked. Being the reliable one creeps up on you. One favor at a time. Picking Brian up from ballet because Mom had a deadline, even though I had a club event. Folding Dad's shirts because Brian got distracted, and then watching how distraction earned praise. I used to think I was helping. That dependability made me special. But reliability turned into invisible. Brian was all chaos and light. Public meltdowns, poems scribbled on napkins, a dozen half-finished majors before she chose spiritual anthropology. People adored her for being wild and magnetic. My parents treated her like she was precious, even when she broke everything around her. Me? I was the shelf they stacked her on. They called it the shared net, our family fund. Mom's side hustle income, Dad's academic stipends, my freelance earnings. It began after Brian's second hospital stay, just in case someone else ever needs help. I remember that wording exactly. Someone else. Not Brian. Not again. Someone else, but I was never someone else. I was the backup. The first time Brian emptied the account, it was for a retreat in the Catskills. Transformative, she said. The second time, it was a failed relocation to LA for a memoir she never wrote. They told me not to be so uptight about money. That Brian was becoming. Meanwhile, I went 2 years without new glasses and let my car insurance lapse just to keep up. Now they'd left me with her daughter, bled the account dry, and vanished to Barcelona like this was some overdue sabbatical. That message wasn't just cruel, it was clarifying. They never meant to return. Not to help, not to check in, not even to explain. I sat in the dim glow of the living room while Era murmured softly in her sleep. I remembered Mom's last visit here, how she'd frowned at my chipped mug and said, "You still don't have matching dishes?" She ignored the handmade tiles I installed in the bathroom, ignored the antique photos I restored for the historical society, just the dishes. Of course she left without a goodbye. That was always her way. That was always their way. I was the quiet daughter, the dependable one. Reliable people don't get warnings, but Era would need one. She would need more than they ever gave. And I was the only one left to figure out how by day 4, my body had adapted to living in fragments. Era's sleep was a riddle 3 short naps or a marathon. Cry from 2 o'clock to 4 a.m. Her lungs were shockingly strong. My nerves were paper thin. I worked in burst editing citations for a regional history journal while she slept on a folded towel beside my keyboard. The client emailed twice asking about the deadline. I lied and blamed a family emergency, which honestly felt like an understatement. Every bottle was a debate. Every diaper is a sprint. I bounced her until my arms burned. I rocked her with true crime podcasts in my ears to stay conscious. There were fleeting moments, tiny flashes when she smiled, gummy and glowing, and I could breathe. Then she'd cry again, and I'd feel like wallpaper fading into the background. Friends sent memes, a few check-ins. No one came by. I called Brian twice, left 1 voicemail. I drafted a 3rd message asking when she planned to return, but I never hit send. What was the point? On Thursday morning, after an endless night of pacing the floor with Era strapped to my chest and sobbing into my shirt, I opened the front door to get the mail and found a warm Tupperware container on the step. A small note written in careful script. "You're doing more than enough." I looked across the hall. Mrs. Aruza's curtains fluttered. She was retired, lived alone, always reading mystery novels by the open window. We'd only ever talked once about trash collection. Later that day, she knocked gently and handed me a folded quilt. "Made it for the wrong size bed," she said flatly, like it was a business exchange. I thanked her. She didn't step inside. Didn't linger, but she saw me. And it was the first time anyone had in days. That night, I sat under the kitchen, light, Era in 1 arm, spooning reheated stew with the other. My arms ached. My chest felt heavy more than hunger. But for the first time that week, I didn't feel entirely alone. The next morning, I went searching for the old folder where my parents kept legal papers. I hadn't set foot in their house since they left. It still smelled like lemon polish and arrogance. I told myself I was there for baby formula or to find an old crib. But I knew I was looking for something else. Answers. Proof.era. Slept peacefully in her carrier as I wandered through the kitchen, opening drawers with cautious hands. The fridge held only fig jam and half a bottle of Prosecco. The cabinets were 2 cleared out by people who don't plan on returning. In the bottom drawer, under junk mail and a busted corkscrew, I found a battered green folder labeled Spain. Inside were printed itineraries dating back 6 months, plane tickets, a sign lease, Spanish SIM cards, already activated. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't driven by emotion. It was deliberate, meticulously premeditated. Tucked behind the stack of travel itineraries was an official-looking, notarized document. My name, my address, my signature copied, likely from an outdated rental lease. That's when I saw it clearly. The power of attorney form for Quinn. Age 6 months, designating me as her legal guardian indefinitely. I pressed my thumb to the paper, stunned, trying to comprehend the weight of what I was holding. They had made me Era's legal custodian, without warning, without discussion, without even the courtesy of pretending my opinion mattered. Buried deeper inside the folder, I found a printed bank record. The shared family account dated 2 weeks prior to their disappearance. A withdrawal of $21,600. The destination? Meridian Trust, International Private Banking Division. Not even a U.S. financial institution. They'd moved the funds overseas. I sat motionless at their kitchen table. the same place where they once hosted academic colleagues, corrected my grammar, and taught me to sit up straight. I stared at the numbers. I should have been angry. I should have wanted to scream or break something, but all I felt was an eerie stillness. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a transaction. They had chosen personal freedom and offered me era as justification. A saucepan sat on the counter with a boutique sticker still on it, $240 from a Portland kitchen store. They left that behind too. I refolded the documents and slid them into my bag. Then I stood and looked around the house one last time, almost expecting their voices to echo through the walls. But there was only silence, and the silence didn't apologize back. At my apartment, I lay down and opened my laptop. I typed how to file for emergency guardianship in Virginia. I expected the legal aid office to be cold, fluorescent, and rushed. In many ways, it was. The buzzing lights overhead, the receptionist who barely looked up. But then a man stepped into the room, tie askew, sleeves rolled past his elbows, introducing himself as Ephraim Rhodes. When he looked at me, he didn't see a problem to fix. He saw a person. That alone almost undid me. I handed over the papers, the forged power of attorney, the international bank statement, the travel arrangements. He read through each page slowly, carefully, then tapped the documents once before speaking. "They never informed you of this transfer?" he asked, brows tight with concern. "No," I said. "They just left." He nodded, jaw clenched. "Then this isn't just guardianship. This could qualify as financial abandonment, possibly fraud depending on how that family account was defined legally." He explained that while the notarized authority form had legal standing, the surrounding deception complicated everything. If we could prove they offloaded responsibility without my consent, and that shared assets were misused, there were grounds to challenge both the custody assignment and the financial withdrawals. I asked him how the process worked. He told me it would be slow, messy, exhausting. I told him I'd already been up for weeks on 2 hours of sleep. What was one more uphill climb? That afternoon, I began piecing everything together: receipts, text messages from Brian, screenshots, Mom's last message. I created a color-coded spreadsheet. I labeled each folder. It felt obsessive, but also grounding. Like I was building a case, one painful page at a time. 2 days later, Brian finally called. I almost didn't pick up, but I wanted her voice recorded. "Danica," she said sharply. Her voice clipped, smug. "You agreed to this." "No," I replied. "You asked me to help for a weekend? That's not the same thing." There was silence on the other end, and then laughter, cold, dismissive. "You always make everything into a drama. You seriously think they abandoned you? Grow up. They're done carrying your dead weight." My hand trembled. I steadied my voice before speaking again. "They weren't carrying me," I said calmly. "They were hiding behind me," she scoffed. "This is ridiculous. You're not going to scare us with your legal tantrums." I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch. She hung up. I saved the audio recording, backed it up twice that night. Ira had a low fever. I held her against my chest, her breath warm and irregular, and stared at the ceiling as streetlight shadows flickered above us. I didn't feel brave. I didn't feel victorious, but I wasn't afraid of them anymore. The next morning, I called Ephraim. "I have something you need to hear," I told him. Then, on a quiet Sunday morning, as I was warming a bottle, a text arrived. "We're flying back. We want to talk. No apology, no explanation. Just entitlement like they were coming to reclaim." Lost luggage. I never responded. 3 days later, they showed up at my door. Sandra wore a luxury scarf and expensive perfume. Talbot had sunglasses perched on his head like a crown. They looked tan, glowing like people who hadn't had to worry about anyone but themselves in months. I opened the door just enough to feel their intentions hit the threshold. Then I stopped. "You." Look exhausted, Sandra said as she pushed past me. Still juggling that part-time gig? Talbot followed, arms folded, eyes inspecting my apartment like he was scanning for flaws. We were surprised you didn't reach out, he said. Thought you'd have questions. Maybe this just isn't your thing. Not everyone's cut out for parenting. I didn't say a word. I let them ramble. Sandra approached Era, who was seated in her high chair, gumming on banana. She clicked. Her tongue. Her posture's terrible. You have to be more consistent with tummy time. I turned and faced them fully. Calm, firm. I filed for full custody 3 weeks ago. I said. They froze. I submitted proof of the unauthorized bank transfers, the forged power of attorney, and the fact that you left the country without notifying me. I also have a recorded call from Brian confirming I never agreed to long-term guardianship. Talbot shifted uncomfortably. Danica, there's no need to turn this into a battle. Sandra took a cautious step forward. Let's not make this uglier than it has to be. It's already ugly, I replied. I just stopped pretending. It wasn't. Silence fell. Sandra's face-tensed eyes narrow with the calculated cruelty I'd grown up recognizing. Talbot sighed dramatically, like a stage actor disappointed in his audience. I think we should go. He muttered. I nodded and held the door open. Sandra paused on her way out. You've always had a flair for theatrics, she snapped. I just didn't think you'd drag a child into it. I didn't blink. I didn't reply. I closed the door, turned the lock, and exhaled. Era dropped her banana and clapped her hands. That afternoon, Ephraim called. Our court date had been moved up. The courtroom smelled like lemon polish and tension. The overhead lights were too bright. Ephraim walked confidently, holding our binder like it was sacred text. I sat beside him, hands tightly folded, eyes on. The judge, not my parents. Sandra and Talbot arrived 10 minutes late. Brian never showed. Ephraim laid out the timeline. He presented the notarized documents, the prepaid travel arrangements dated months earlier, the bank transfers to the offshore account. Then he played the recording, Brian's voice, cold and dismissive, admitting I never consented to guardianship. A printed transcript followed. Sandra cleared her throat. Talbot smirked. They didn't deny the facts. They tried to reframe them. My daughter has always had a flair for exaggeration, Sandra said smoothly. She's under tremendous stress. Raising a baby that isn't hers, it's understandable she'd feel overwhelmed. The judge remained expressionless. I've examined the records thoroughly, she stated, her tone calm and unwavering. What disturbs me isn't solely the neglect, but the calculated execution of the handoff. Miss Quinn was deceived and abandoned, stripped of both emotional and financial backing. She paused deliberately, fixing her gaze on my parents. I'm awarding full legal guardianship to Miss Quinn. The offshore funds will be frozen until further investigation. Any visits from Sandra or Talbot Quinn must be supervised and cleared beforehand. Sandra parted her lips to speak. The judge lifted her hand. That's all. We're finished. Outside, the wind had grown fiercer. Sandra stopped me at the steps of the courthouse. You've always resented Brian, she said sharply, her voice barely above a whisper, slicing through the air. Since you were little, you waited for an opportunity to punish us for loving her more. I met her eyes but offered no reply. She pivoted on her heels, the sound of them tapping against stone, with Talbot silently trailing behind. Made my way to the parking lot, where Era waited with Mrs. Alls, who had shown up without needing to be asked. The baby squealed with delight upon seeing me, arms stretched wide in welcome. Later that night, as I gently rocked her to sleep, I realized I wasn't experiencing relief. Instead, there was a quiet, unfamiliar emptiness like the last fading vibration of a sound long gone. The following morning, I opened my inbox and saw a message from Ephraim marked urgent. Now, the kill hums softly in the background, its warmth steady and low. I keep it on during most mornings, while Era plays on the quilted mat just a few feet from me. The cradle I crafted from old pine slats rests beside shelves lined with glazed bowls. Sometimes she naps there, her tiny fingers curled around the hand-stitched cloth doll Mrs. Oles made with care dot. My hands have returned to the clay. The wheel turns once again. I open the studio twice a week, 3 times. If Era seems calm and content. Orders come in slowly, but they come. The neighborhood cafe replenished their mug display with my pieces just last month. A college student recently reached out about commissioning a custom set for her thesis project. Accept what I can and release the rest. Each Friday, Mrs. Alls stops by with a batch of oatmeal cookies, lovingly wrapped in wax paper. She never lingers, just checks in, gives my arm a gentle squeeze, then vanishes down the street. Her quiet presence has become its own form of healing study. Trustworthy, nothing like the chaotic adults of my upbringing. There are still mornings. I wake expecting a new email, some unforeseen twist. But months have passed and the stillness has settled into something tolerable. The legal matters are nearly resolved. The account remains inaccessible. Nothing from Brian. I've stopped waiting. Just last week, Ira took her first steps wobbling between my workstation and the studio door. She stumbled after the third step and burst into laughter, as if it were all part of a game. I laughed too then, cried quietly in the kitchen after she was asleep, not out of sadness, but because I got to witness it. Yesterday, I wrote Brian a letter, not because I had to, but to tie up a loose thread. I kept it brief. Era is safe, I wrote. That's what matters. I didn't include a return address, and this morning, as I opened the studio and pressed my fingers into cool, wet clay, I glanced at the tiny cradle beside me, the small bowl Era had dented with her thumb, and the faint traces of flowers still scattered on the floor from her latest toddler baking attempt. They left me behind so they could escape, but I remained. And I built something,